Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Janani Vijayaraghavan with Plan International Canada. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very exciting webinar, where we will hear from youth leaders and various stakeholders, including the Honorable Twambo Mutinta, who's a Member of Parliament in Zambia, and Mr. Fred Simwaka, Ministry of Gender, Community Development and Social Welfare in Malawi. And they've all of these key partners have been involved in landing commitments at the Global Forum for Adolescents. Please note that we do have simultaneous translation available in French and Spanish, and we ask that all speakers speak slowly so that the translations can be captured. If you need translation, please click the globe icon on your screen to start the translation. I will now hand over to Chris Armstrong from Plan International Canada to kick us off.
I'm here, sorry. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I do have some slides to share, but I just realized I'm not actually able to share. So Tahira, I flipped you some slides. If you're able to share them, that's great. If not, it's not a big deal. So just a warm welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining. As Janani mentioned, I'm the Director of Health at Plan International Canada. I think my role is just to provide a bit of context as to why we're all here, kind of set the stage for things, and then I'm going to hand over to Anshu Mohan with the Secretariat of the Partnership on Maternal, Newborn, and Child Health. So why are we here? Adolescent well-being is, I think as many of you know, one of the three areas of focus of the Partnership on Maternal, Newborn, and Child Health. And PMNCH has been working together with stakeholders like Plan International and other partners to really try to leverage their work and to bring greater attention to adolescent well-being, particularly in country contexts, country settings, but also at the global stage. And we'll talk a little bit about that, really with a focus on trying to bring greater emphasis on adolescent well-being within the SDG framework. So I'm going to give a very brief overview of what that looks like, what's been going on in that regard, and then we'll get into the specifics. So the adolescent well-being framework was developed through a participatory process, and it's a framework that's meant to guide those who are working in adolescent well-being, and it was developed through a participatory process with young people. It identified 5 domains that are relevant and essential to adolescent well-being. Those 5 areas were health and nutrition, connectedness, learning competence, employability and education, safety and a supportive environment, agency and resilience, and then following and that was disseminated fairly widely. And a number of pieces of work were done to get that framework out to stakeholders to better understand how we can advance adolescent well-being. In an effort to kind of bring that framework to action, there was an accountability or an agenda for action that was developed. And together with the framework and the agenda for action, they were used to really advocate at country level and at global level for as I said, greater attention for adolescent well-being through multiple efforts. And these types of efforts included things like publications in the British Medical Journal, publications in the Lancet, events were held at high-level fora, such as the UN General Assembly and the SDG Summit. And many of you will remember or have participated in the Global Forum for Adolescents, which was held last year in October, which was a massive online gathering of young people to speak to the challenges and some of the achievements in adolescent well-being. And all of this was underpinned by a 1.8 billion Young People for Change campaign, which was really meant to mobilize action, as I said, around adolescent well-being and to bring forward the voices of young people in sort of defining what their needs were and to call on governments to respond to the needs of young people. So today we're going to talk about one of those specific mechanisms that put the 1.8 billion campaign into action. So Plan International, with the support of the Botner Foundation, we're going to hear from the Botner Foundation a little bit later as well. Together with PMNCH and its memberships, undertook to support youth-led campaigns, really to mobilize government commitments, specifically in this within this effort in 7 countries. You're going to hear from some individuals and organizations in those countries today. Those countries were Malawi, Zambia, Tanzania, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, and Bolivia. And this work was done hand in hand with youth-led organizations and stakeholders in country. Really, the efforts were undertaken through a youth-led process to identify what gaps existed in terms of government action and government commitment with respect to adolescent well-being and with respect to those 5 domains that I outlined. There was then efforts undertaken to advocate government to address those gaps and to put greater emphasis on adolescent well-being. And then finally, the 3rd step was to identify and define an accountability mechanism. And again, a youth-led accountability mechanism where young people could hold their governments to account for the commitments and the actions that they promised to make. So as I mentioned today, you're going to hear from the stakeholders who were involved in that process at country about what worked well for them, what some of the challenges were that they faced, and then finally what some of the lessons that they took from it. And the intent of today is for hopefully those of us who continue to be involved in this work to better understand how youth-led advocacy can work, and hopefully continue to drive the adolescent well-being agenda. So I think I'll leave it there. I apologize I wasn't able to put the slides up, but we'll move on to Anshu and give Anshu a moment to correct everything that I said. Anshu, are you with us?
Yes, thank you very much. And it's a great pleasure to be with all of you today. And I just want to, before I begin, I just want to acknowledge the work and the partnership with Plan International. And it would not have been possible without them and without, of course, the support of the Botner Foundation. And Chris has very nicely laid out the steps that were involved in getting to where we have got to at this point in time. A part of me also feels that we are speaking to the converted. These are people who have done immense amount of work for adolescent well-being, for adolescents writ large in countries, in communities. And that's where the action needs to be. That's where we can move the needle. So what I'm going to do is very briefly speak about what we did achieve over the last few years. Chris has touched upon various aspects of this, and then lay out some thoughts for the group to consider going forward, because it cannot stop here. Adolescent well-being is a universal issue. It's a universal issue that we need to push for, we need to get commitment for, we need to have accountability for. So Chris referenced the 1.8 billion young people for change campaign. And that's because it is time now that we started listening to young people, and moved from just listening to action. So this is the largest cohort of young people in the history, as we well know, 1.8 billion and increasing as we speak. And this demographic window is going to close down very, very quickly. The next 2 decades are the only 2 decades of action. So this is our golden years. These are our slog years. This is where we have to get policy, financial, and strategic commitments in order to get the demographic window, in order to reap the benefits of that window. And in our efforts under the 1.8 billion campaign, a huge significant milestone was last year, the Global Forum for Adolescent in October 2023. And the forum sought to engage partners from across the world on multiple issues. So one and the primary one, and one of the reasons that we are here as well, was to engage partners not only just the forum, but to work with them using a bottoms-up approach to get to secure political and financial commitment from the government, realizing, and I know we have honorable parliamentarians in the House recognizing that government is the biggest service provider that addresses the unique needs of adolescent. Government mechanisms and government systems reach the most vulnerable in communities, in their settings where others are not able to. And the CSOs provide huge level of support to government partners to make sure that this reaches the young people that it is meant to reach. The second objective of the Global Forum for Adolescents was to raise awareness about adolescent well-being. Chris has already talked about the British Medical Journal, the investment case, which was launched at the World Health Assembly this year. And just to make sure that all the knowledge gaps around adolescent well-being were addressed. And PMNCH's effort, PMNCH along with partners' efforts, has been to ensure that those knowledge gaps are plugged. So by the way of the investment framework, by the way of the measurement work, and so on and so forth. Now we are taking the investment case to 3 countries, India, South Africa, and Colombia, and the metrics work as well as an illustration that this knowledge can be translated to suit country context. The third important aspect of the Global Forum for Adolescents was to mobilize 1 million plus young people from across the world to find out what it is that they want for their own well-being. And the fourth one, and the most important one, is to build a very strong and long-term community dedicated to adolescent well-being, contributing to the progress of the SDGs, but most importantly, planting the seeds for what happens beyond SDGs. Most of us know that the SDGs are relatively silent on adolescence and adolescent well-being, but this is the time now to start thinking of what happens post 2030. And we've had efforts to this effect, on various forums. The Nairobi meeting around CSOs was very, very helpful in pushing some of those. The CPD that happened, the ICPD 30 plus in Benin. There have been multiple forums, and we've continued to advocate, and civil society and parliamentarians and governments have been a key partner helping us to push for their agenda. Quickly coming back, this was just to give you a sense of, what was the aim and objective of the forum, but the campaign doesn't stop at the forum. We continue. We continue to push forward, both in terms of making sure that the knowledge products filter down to the country level and people are using it. I mean, we're not just producing knowledge products for the sake of producing knowledge products, but the whole idea is to make sure that these are accessible to partners and they're able to use this in their advocacy work. So this is very much a part of our ongoing strategy, and our work does not stop at the Global Forum for Adolescents, which was in fact hugely important milestone to get those commitments. We secured 18 commitments where world leaders and high-level participants responded to what young people have requested for their well-being. And this is the call to action that comes out of this exercise that we did. We reached about 1.6 million young people in 99 countries, and they came back with their response, and they said, we want education, we want health and well-being, we want safety and supportive environment. And so the commitments that came, and through your efforts, in a way reflect the demands of young people. These commitments include significant financial pledges. They also articulate policy change, policy shift, policy redesign. I'm not saying that there are no policies for adolescents at the country level, but there are policies, but they need to be updated. They need to be concurrent. They need to take into account the various needs of adolescents, acknowledging that adolescents are not a homogeneous group. I mean, they're not a monolith. They live in different contexts. Some are more vulnerable than the others. And there is a huge amount of contextualization that needs to happen. And therefore, policy redesign and reshift is an important piece of this. And last but not the least, these commitments are not just paper commitments. They lead to accountability, which means that CSO organization, young people within their standing parliamentary committees or various other accountability mechanisms that you may have at the country level, there would be there would be an accountability mechanism to hold duty bearers to account on what they have pledged to do for adolescents and where the gaps are and what needs to be done more. So the commitments serve as an important mechanism to make sure that government in particular is putting the money where the mouth is. Apologies for a slightly crude expression, but that's the objective of this. And these commitments were not generated on their own. Civil society actors, youth group, private businesses, academics, health providers, they worked alongside government leadership to support the development of national commitments. There was a whole lot of background work by the way of evidence, analysis, community level information to identify the areas of need, possible policy approaches, and also all of this was underpinned by MAIE, by the meaningful adolescent and youth engagement, because we are very much committed to making sure that this is just not something that is said, but this is something that is activated and acted upon in every which way. And PMNCH has done that in its work, and along with partners to make sure that young people are engaging with these agendas, with these issues in an absolutely safe manner. There is no retribution. And then MAIE becomes the entry point for the carrying agenda of other issues. And from that point of view, it becomes extremely important. But that was the year 2023. 2024 has a whole set of new opportunities, the Summit of the Future, where we are going to be at the United Nations General Assembly, which is another opportunity to gather more commitments. There are 192 countries in the world. We can't just stop at 18. So PMNCH will continue to prioritize adolescent well-being in the global, national and regional forums and discourse. Our ongoing efforts will be driven by the voices of adolescents and youth, making sure that their needs are at the center of these commitments, and these are not done without a say-so of the young people. Today, we are very pleased and very honored to hear from partners who have been extremely vital to this initiative, have been instrumental in achieving these commitments. Their experience will inspire and engage us, and also give us a little shot in the arm to take the next steps and to make sure that we are planning efficiently. We are learning from the lessons learned, and that as we move towards the GA, this is an opportunity to garner more commitments, and we will persist in mobilizing. We are committed to supporting the implementation and monitoring the progress made against these commitments through targeted and coordinated accountability mechanisms and existing mechanisms. But more than that, I think we have to as a group to start thinking about beyond 2030. This conversation doesn't end at 2030. Actually, this is the starting point. I thank you very much for your dedication to these efforts, and together I'm very certain we can be successful in getting to that number. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to hearing the panel. Back to you, Janani.
Thank you, Anshu and Chris, for setting the stage for our next panel, where we will now turn to our youth leaders from Malawi, Zambia, Ghana, and Nigeria. This session will be moderated by Pelemo Nyajo, a Nigerian youth and disability activist who herself has been a key player in the advocacy work in Nigeria. Over to you, Pelemo.
Thank you so much, Janani. And thank you so much, Anshu and Chris, for giving so much context to this. I was really excited to hear this because I was a part of the Global Forum for Adolescents myself, and I contributed in a lot of different ways. And at some point, I asked myself, how are we going to move forward with the commitments? And there were a lot of activities that happened in Nigeria after the GFA. So I'm excited to see that there's a lot of action still being taken by development partners and governments in different countries. And I'm so excited to be a part of this panel. So I'm a poet, and I would usually say something. It's a call and response. So I would say, my people, and I would ask everyone to say, waiting happen. So that basically means, my people is like asking you a question, and then you say waiting happen. Waiting happen means what happened, right? So that call and response really, I think it fits into this conversation, because the title of this panel discussion is voices of youth are we listening? So as we know, the youth is a very large demographic and we are not a homogeneous group. So a lot of young people have a lot of things to contribute and to say in the different countries. And I have the honor of speaking with 4 different panelists from 4 different countries, from Malawi, from Ghana, from Zambia, and from Nigeria. If you are one of the panelists, please can you turn on your cameras so that we can see your beautiful faces, and I will introduce you now. So I'm going to give a brief introduction on the panelists who will be speaking. They were all involved in one way or the other in the mobilization process for the Global Forum for Adolescents and everything that's come about. So I'm really excited to hear you. So the first speaker we have is the amazing Michelle Tandiwe Makino. If I did not pronounce your name correctly, you have to forgive me and teach me how to say it when you come on. So Michelle is a 20-year-old Malawian active young leader and advocate for adolescent health, youth, and young women inclusion in policy formation, decision-making, and implementation processes. Wow. Our second speaker is Shirley Awudu Amankwa. If I said that right, I hope I said that right. She's a 22-year-old from Ghana, very passionate about advocating for girls' rights and access to sexual and reproductive health resources, inspired by organizations like Plan International. Our third speaker is Tokozile Banda. She is a highly motivated Zambian law student with a strong passion for human rights, gender equality, and social justice. And our final speaker is Omata Wisdom. She's a Nigerian graduate of law, passionate about social justice and gender equality. She's also the Shadow Country Director for Plan International Nigeria currently. So it's so amazing to have all of you on this panel, and I can't wait to learn from your wealth of experience. So I will have to plead with you guys to keep your answers to like 2 minutes so that we don't go over time. So the first person I'm going to be asking is Michelle. So the first question is basically talking about how you were engaged in the commitment mobilization process. What was it for you? How were you able to be involved? Was it meaningful to you? So we really want to hear from the young people, and we want to know in very honest terms what you feel, because we will never get to a point of achieving adolescent health if we do not hear honest opinions from what you have learned from the process. So what was the commitment mobilization process for you? Was it meaningful? Were you engaged, and how was that?
Thank you so much. My name is Michelle Tandiwe Makina. As explained, I am from Malawi, and I'm one of the young people that was engaged in the commitment mobilization process. I was engaged, I was invited to the 1.8 billion adolescent well-being orientation of the youth-led CSOs and other CSOs. I was also engaged in the gap analysis processes, and which aimed at analyzing the commitments Malawi had already made and is implementing to document progress, challenges faced, and recommended actions to accelerate the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals targets and indicators. I also contributed to the mapping out campaign messages and areas of focus for Malawi, and outlined the advocacy for the campaign launch and the activities to undertake at various levels in Malawi. I was also one of the young people conducting the advocacy dissemination in all regions of Malawi. I have also contributed to the national event and global launch of the 1.8 billion adolescent well-being plan phase, resource mobilization, implementation of the national and global adolescent and youth well-being forum. I was one of the young people that also took part in the launch by also opening with a prayer during the national launch. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I'm so glad that you were really, really involved in the process. It sounds like you were active and you actually made very meaningful contributions. So we'll be moving on to Tokozile. Please let me know if I pronounced your name properly also. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Tokozile, as mentioned, and yes, you have pronounced it all right. So for me, I was engaged in the commitments mobilization process through Plan International because we're part of the youth advisory panelists. And Plan International was also engaging other young women. So it wasn't just me, it was a combination of young girls and young people, boys included, from different organizations like Restless, Global Platform, Action Aid, and we all came together to have and look at various strategies like the National Strategic Plan. And also we had various meetings such as the Indaba. We had Indabas. Indabas are like meetings that we come together. We use a local term called Indaba. We also had various consultative meetings and watch parties. We had the SDG summit sessions, and literally to mention but a few. And it was in those meetings that we, the young people, came to look at various documents, various policies that we got to analyze, including what else? The Zambian National Health Strategic Plan and the Adolescent Health Strategic Plan on the health of young people. And these indulgements, these meetings, these stakeholder meetings actually meant that we got to be part of whatever initiative that's coming up. So the meetings that were coming further were the ones able to detect for ourselves what should be done, how we should be engaged, and what else should follow. And that's how we as a nation, or we as the young people of Zambia, were engaged in commitment mobilization process. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Tokozile. And I learned a new word, Indaba. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we'll be moving on to Shirley. Please, can you let us know how it was for you in Ghana?
Thank you so much, Pelemo, and then all those who have spoken, Michelle, and then Tokozile. And I'm very glad to meet you all today because I met Tokozile in Zambia as well during the SDG summit. So that was also another way I also participated at the country level. Also coming down to Ghana, we were really engaged, not just me, but other young people were really engaged in diverse ways. And first of all, we got to participate in meetings, stakeholder meetings, where there was a consultation for perspectives on the status of the government's commitment. So they got to send people on the field to get knowledge on what young people actually want. So they went around regions in Ghana to get commitment, to mobilize the commitment. And after that, after the commitments were drafted, young people also got the opportunity to take part in tax meetings. And I was privileged to be part of the financial commitment tax meeting, where we were able to contribute our views on the drafted commitment. So we just went through the commitment, got to know whether these are really what young people want, and just basically let them know about the commitment, the content of the commitment, and also contribute their views. After that came the sensitization process, where we went into the regions again. It's like a feedback kind of mechanism, where we went back into the regions, where we solicited for the information to go back to the young people to tell them about the commitments they participated in or they brought up. And so that was also another way we participated. Young people were able to learn about some of the commitments that were drafted by the government and also ask questions about these commitments. And lastly, we had a National Adolescent Forum, which brought together young people from diverse backgrounds. So we had young persons with disabilities. We had young persons from rural areas, young persons from at the secondary school level, to come together to demand accountability and also to propose accountability mechanisms, because normally we demand accountability or we say we want to demand accountability, and mostly we don't know how to demand the accountability. So it was really a great opportunity for young people to come together to propose accountability mechanisms as well as demand accountability. So these are the major ways we contributed, as well as, of course, the SDG summits, where we got to learn from other countries in Africa on how they are actually going about the commitment mobilization process. And so basically, these are some of the ways we were engaged.
Amazing, Shirley. Thank you so much for sharing. Something that I particularly loved about what you said was when you spoke about accountability and not knowing how to demand accountability. I think that's something that young people struggle with, because we always talk about hold the government accountable, but how do you actually go about that? So I'm really glad that in Ghana, you're able to achieve so much, and that is amazing to hear. Now we're moving on to Wisdom from Nigeria.
Thank you for having me. Commitment for me, the engagement for me started before the GFA. We had the Ministry of Education constitute a TWG, the Technical Working Group, that involved a lot of stakeholders, youth representatives. Me and some other members of the Girls Get Equal True Plan were part of the meeting. And at the meeting, we basically analyzed ongoing process as regards adolescent health in Nigeria. And then we reviewed 2 documents. We reviewed the clinical protocol for the health and development of adolescents and young people in Nigeria. We also analyzed the national guideline for adolescent health programming for young people. So we basically looked at the existing protocols, we looked at the mechanisms we had in place, we checked the gaps, we checked the challenges, and it was very engaging. It was not tokenistic. There were young people there, and we were carried along in the way that we were asked questions. Okay, you are young people, you're adolescents, and you feel this thing, you understand this thing better than we do. We may have the expertise and experience to understand how to cater for these problems, but first we need to understand how the problem affects you. So we were carried along in the whole process. We went through the documents. We spoke about certain mechanisms that were no longer feasible for the time and situation that we're in. We talked about some of the protocols that were outdated. And then we also had the democracy convening, which was like a coalition of young people. We also touched upon adolescent health. We touched upon sexual reproductive health and rights. And we interacted with government officials, which to me is like the most important part of activism, where you always have to get the key players involved. Then I think in March this year, we had the Adolescent Forum, where we had government stakeholders, we had members of different youth-led organizations, we had members of the Nigerian Youth Parliament, Nigerian Children Parliament. We had all these people come together, we had a document drafted, we came up with an accountability mechanism, and we basically just a reiteration of what we've been saying, a demand, this is what we want, this is where we think the government should come in, and then we garnered commitments from the relevant stakeholders.
Thank you so much, Wisdom. Thank you. And I'm so glad to know that every one of you are doing something to make sure that the commitments are actually fulfilled. And something that I think was a recurring theme in everything that everyone said was moving from global commitments to local action, and actually including young people in the processes. And I'm really glad that this is happening, because I know a lot of different things that happen. Young people are not actively involved, and there's a lot of tokenism going on. So I'm really glad to hear that you were involved in the process and you were able to mobilize. So this brings me to my next question, which is, what did you learn from the process? because a lot happened and there are a lot of different stakeholders. There were people in power, different people, and there's a lot you would possibly have learned from this. So what changed for you? What did you learn that was new? What was different for you, and what really did it for you? So let's start with I'm thinking, should I go in the same order or should I just, what do you think? Michelle, would you like to go first?
I think same order is fine.
Okay. So let's have Michelle.
Thank you so much. What I really learned from the whole process, from the process of the commitments and whatnot, is that the commitments that were made by the government were made without consultation with young people to look at their perspective and not what young people want. For example, the Malawi analysis on the study on what young people want showed that the learning competence was education, skills, and employability was higher rather than the good health and well-being and optimum nutrition, which was put first. So learning and competency came first for young people in Malawi than the good health and well-being. And the second one is that of safe and supportive environment with up to 345,000 and 364 young people demand. So it came second for young people, whilst the government put connectedness and positive values and contribution to society as second. And the other one was of good health and optimal nutrition, which came third for young people. This the government put safety and supportive environment as third to what young people want. And connectedness and positive values and contribution to the society came forth, while learning, competence, education, skills, and employability came forth in the government commitments. Ages and resilience was the same, and same as ages and resilience, the commitment that was made by the government agents and resilience. If properly guided, young people can influence policy, resource allocation, and program implementation. We were able to recommend what needs to be added, which was completely left out, such as menstrual health and hygiene, redefined climate change impacts, and the need of action in relation to Malawi. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I think what you said was very critical, because if young people are not included in the issues that concern them, then no real progress can be made. So we need to include young people to know what the pressing issues are and how to prioritize them. So Thokozile, was that different for you? What did you learn? How was it for you in your country?
Right. Thank you very much. And yes, it actually was different from Michelle's experience. First and foremost, when we were engaged, I had little but not as much knowledge on various policies that are in my country as they were there. So firstly, we had as I mentioned earlier, we have the Zambia National Health Strategic Plan. That's a 2022 to 2026 plan. And then we also have the strategic plan of the National Health Ministry. And then we have the national standards and guidelines for youth-friendly spaces. So for the national standard and guidelines for youth-friendly spaces, youth-friendly health spaces or services, I had worked in a youth-friendly space before, but then getting to be in a place during the whole risk mobilization, commitment mobilization process, I got to interact with people who have worked in various youth-friendly spaces in Zambia. And this got to expose me to different aspects, different knowledge gaps, things that were there that I did not know, and things that I thought needed more concentration, maybe needed more attention. And we got to realize that Zambia has actually made a commitment of increasing the number of youth-friendly health spaces from 900 by 2030. And I thought that's actually a good commitment, because what I got to realize, what we got to learn, or personally from my experience, is that we as the young people don't really get to look at the documents or the policies that are actually going on in the nation and mostly advocate from different perspectives, but getting to join hands and see what Plan International is doing, getting to see what the country Zambia is doing, the government, and also international organizations, and come together and see how best we can work around issues to do with adolescent health came in as a priority for me, because I noticed that every aspect is trying to make progress. However, the more we, the young people, are being included, the more we are also cooperating with efforts that have gone before us, the more progress we get to make. Another thing I got to learn was that in as much as we have various policies, it all goes back to the commitments we are making as people. So how much is the government committed to ensuring that what is in the laws, what is in the policies is actually being implemented? How much is it being monitored? How much evaluation is going into such processes? Not just the governments, but the organizations as well. And also how much is the young person, how much effort is the young person putting in to ensure that what they have been advocating for is actually working? I feel like this also calls for collaborative efforts, not just in a sense of, I'm trying not to go to recommendations, but not just in a sense of consultations, but also in the inception. How much are we being included during the inception process, during the commitment processes, and afterwards? How are we ensuring that these things that have been put in place are actually being implemented? And I feel like that was a big knowledge gap for me that I got to learn during this process, and also getting to interact with other people from different countries. Let's say during the AY SDG Summit, as Shirley said, we got to meet in Zambia, and this actually exposed me to various ways that other countries are doing things, and also enabled me to actually implement some of the things that they're doing. Let's say in Nigeria, the way they have various meetings with their stakeholders and their chiefs also exposed me to actually finding different ways of getting to engage chiefs, because it's in most chiefdoms in Zambia that get to have a higher rate of people that are being married off at a young age, high rate of adolescents that are being engaged in child marriages, and getting to see how Nigeria actually gets to handle their issues with their chiefs also got to allow me to expose them, or to talk to them about how we are doing it in Zambia to ensure that they are also benefiting. So I feel like the collaborative approach on how people are doing things and the reference system is what stood out to me the most. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Can we move on to Shirley? Shirley, what stood out for you? What did you learn?
Yes, so my experience, I think, is pretty much like that of Thokozile. I also got to build my confidence as well, and also to learn how to demand accountability. Just as Thokozile was saying, it was a great opportunity for us to meet other people from other countries, to learn how they also do their things and look at how we can contextualize those things. But one thing that actually stood out for me was during the tax meeting, where we had the stakeholder engagement during the tax meeting where I got to participate in the drafting of the financial commitment. There was something that was very striking, because before I never knew that there was a budget that was to be disseminated or was to be given to the Ministry of Health for programs that involve young people and adolescents. I never knew that. And as if that was all that happened, actually, this budget was supposed to be 7.6, but decreased from 7.6 to 6.7 in 2021. And it was very important that I got to know such a thing, because without knowing, how do we demand accountability? If we are saying that we want to know whether all these commitments are going to be fulfilled, how do we demand these kind of accountability if we are not aware, we are not even aware of some of the things they've committed to? So that was one of the things that really stood out to me. And I really learned a lot from that we need to be able to know what is going on. We need to be able to know what our governments are committing to. Another thing that also was very striking for me was the fact that young people are actually ready to learn. In our part of the world, in Africa, mostly in Africa, the old elderly people say that young people are only interested in social media. They don't learn anything. We claim we want to be getting opportunities and all, but we don't want to put in the work. But this really made me realize that young people are ever ready to make a change, to change wherever they find themselves. Because when we went for the sensitization program in the various secondary schools, young people really expressed interest after we spoke to them about the commitments and everything. You could see the participation, you could see how they were asking questions, and some even went to the extent of asking us how they will get to know if really taxes on menstrual products are scrapped, because that is one of the things that we are advocating for, that taxes on menstrual pads will be scrapped. And so asking these kind of questions really made me know that young people are interested in policies, are interested in politics, are interested in things that go on around them. And so just as Tokozile was saying, I think that more education and sensitization and skills training should be given to young people. And I think that we will be ever ready to take on the world.
Thank you so much, Shirley. That ended on a very powerful note. So Wisdom, what did you learn from the entire process? What stood out to you?
Okay, first I have to apologize. I'm in a hostel, so there might be a couple of background noise. I learned that government is a people. There are people in government. Now, speaking from the Nigerian perspective, it's always very easy. Sorry, please. From the Nigerian perspective, it's always very easy for us to just throw blames at the government without actually knowing who in the government. Now, from engaging in these stakeholder meetings, I discovered that the government is not just an abstract body. It's not just some divine entity. It's just a group of people. And with the right approach, with engaging with the right people, with having access to these people, the change that we desire, we can make the change that we desire. In the course of engaging with some of these people, I engaged with some lawmakers, and I discovered that this is like a regular human. This is just like any other person. And with the right approach, these people get to understand. Sometimes they're very caught up from the reality of the common man. They're very caught up from the reality of young people. They're very caught up from the reality of women. We need meaningful engagement. We need this kind of meetings and collaborations with them to bring them to like a common place where they can see beyond their privileges, because a lot of times they are blinded by privilege. And then we have to come away from the place where we are always casting blames, where we are always looking at the government as the enemy, and then begin to look at the government as a partner, people we have to collaborate with, and see that there are not people beyond our reach. There are people we can always reach out to. There are people we can work together with, and then we can effect the change that we desire.
Thank you so much, Wisdom. That actually takes us to the final aspect of this panel. You said the government is not abstract, they are human beings, and that is very true. I think a lot of young people don't really have access to the government, so sometimes it can just look like, oh, we can't influence it, but we really can. And this leads me to my next question, which is, what areas would you like young people to have a voice, and would you like to see addressed by those people and by young people? This is the closing statement. This is the final statement. So in 30 seconds, if you can just share what you want to be done for young people, your demands, what does a voice for young people look like? So I'm starting with Michelle. So everybody has 30 seconds to briefly share a powerful statement on what they believe.
Thank you so much. To answer your question, there is need age and youth inclusion, especially in policies and programs that concern young people. as they will promote inclusivity and development, and also help in bridging the demographic divide in Malawi and also across the globe. And also, to add on that, the young people must also be accountable for their actions and must also follow accountability, the government accountability in regards to the commitments that have been made towards accelerating the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, and also the commitment of on the 1.8 billion adolescent well-being commitments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So we got bridging the demographic divide and accountability. Those are very strong points. Thokozile, what do you have to say?
Thank you. Due to time, I will focus on having an open door policy for young people to be able to access. This is also to further encourage youth engagement. It would be beneficial to establish clear communication channels so that we should be able to air our voices, and also ensure that not just what we're saying is not necessarily taken as tokenism, and we should be involved in everything, the inception process, during the carrying out of the process, and even in the end of the process, is that we should be engaged from beginning to end. And we should also ensure that even after the processes have been done, even after the commitments are made, there should be enough evaluation, monitoring and evaluation to ensure that there are sustainable efforts on what we, the young people, have actually put across. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You shared so much in such a short time. That's so amazing. Thank you so much. I heard M&E being involved in all the processes and clear communication channels. Thank you so much, Thokozile. Shirley, what do you have to say about that?
Yes, okay. So I would like to recommend that there should be active participation of young people. Mostly when we talk about active participation, normally they bring us into meetings to come and participate, and then it ends there, or sometimes they take some of what we say and then it just ends there. But I believe that active participation and meaningful participation actually is more of letting the young people know what they are engaged in, and also building their agency. While in the introduction, they mentioned building agency, as well as knowledge gap, bridging the knowledge gap. So I believe that young people should be given the opportunity to actually know what is going on the field. So for example, I'll just give one example and I'm done. I believe that organizations like Plan International and other donor organization, Foundation Botna, other donor organizations should endeavor to give opportunities to young people to actually work with them. For example, WHO can bring in young people while they are on the field to get to know some of the issues that are going on, even in other countries, to the extent of taking them to other countries to go and learn, so that we can all come together to demand accountability and also to suggest ways by which some of these things can be rectified. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shirley. That was so insightful. I heard active participation, building agency, and most importantly, being on the field, which I think personally is very, very important. So moving on to Wisdom to share her wisdom with us.
I think they'll tell what I want to say, but just to reiterate, it's very important for us to focus on the engagement part of the youth engagement watch. A lot of times it's just photo ops, representation, tokenism. We have a meeting, we have young people, and that's it. But it's very important to actually engage these young people from ideation to execution of whatever programs and projects, like meaningfully engage them. We understand that the older people are more experienced, have more skills and expertise, but still, young people should be engaged from ideation to execution meaningfully, and not just to feel our righteousness or just to tick a box.
Thank you so much, Wisdom. Thank you. Meaningful engagement, and that's something I personally stand on. I I will die on that hill of meaningful engagement because there's a lot of tokenism in the youth inclusion space. It's just a buzzword that goes on, so I'm really grateful that everybody had very meaningful insights. And you see, I'm sure that you learned a lot from the GFA that you are contributing in your own work now when it comes to adolescent health. Young people are not just tokens. And inclusion is a right. It is not a privilege. Inclusion and participation of young people in their own issues is a right and not a privilege to create sustainable solutions. So thank you so much. I've heard a lot about going from global commitment to local action. And I would say that is what it is to crown everything, because you can't just make a commitment and not bring it back to the field and to the young people who are actually affected by these issues and who are the owners of the issues, in quotes. So thank you so much to Shirley, Thokozile, Wisdom, and Michelle. You had such meaningful insights, and I hope that you're engaged sustainably moving forward in all the processes that are going to happen in the coming months and moving forward by the different stakeholders and partners involved. Thank you so much, and it's been an honor moderating this session. And now we're moving forward, and I'll be passing it to Janani to take us forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Pelemo, Shirley, Wisdom, Michelle, and Thokozile. That was really powerful. And your hard work and commitment, it's just really inspiring. So is your passion and determination to make sure that adolescents are being heard, that they're being prioritized. And we really thank you for sharing your very thoughtful insights and experiences with us. We're going to turn a little bit to Tahira, who's going from PMNCH, we're now going to have a conversation with some of the other stakeholders who are also involved in making these commitments. Over to you, Tahira.
Thank you so much, Emily. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who's joining us from all parts of the world. My name is Tahira Mustafa. I work with the PMNCH Secretariat, and I'm very pleased to be your moderator for this session. So we heard from Pelemo and some remarkable young leaders who've really been at the forefront of mobilizing commitments for adolescent well-being. Now we want to hear firsthand from the different stakeholders who have been instrumental in this process as well about their engagement and what it actually takes to develop, deliver, and maintain these commitments going forward. A little bit of a behind the scenes journey that we would like to take with you all and understand more in detail about your experiences and insights, but also your learnings about what are some of the best practices that you ventured and what is your takeaway for the rest of the audience who would like to sort of replicate this process in their own countries and work with their governments and different partners on the ground to be able to mobilize commitments for their young champions in their country as well. So let's get started by introducing our panel. Please welcome Honorable Twambo Mutinta, a member of the Zambian Parliament who is joining us today. Thank you, Honorable. Jonathan Abakpa, Advocacy and Youth Program Officer with Plan International Nigeria. Mr. Fred Simwaka, who is the Deputy Director for Women, Children, Women Empowerment in the Ministry of Gender, Community Development and Social Welfare with the Government of Malawi. And finally, we have Edmund Banafo Narte, who is a Technical Officer for Adolescent Health and Development with WHO Ghana. Welcome to all of you, and let's get started. Let's start with Honorable Twambo Mutinta. Honorable, thank you so much for joining us today. As a member of the Parliament, you represent the Itezi constituency. So I'd like to hear a little bit more from you about how the Zambian Parliament itself decided to prioritize the well-being of adolescents in your legislative agenda. And how you work closely with young people in getting this as a priority issue. And more importantly, what accountability mechanisms do you see that are already in place and can be used to ensure that these commitments that the government of Zambia has made can be sustained? Over to you, Honorable.
I'm excited to be part of this important conversation. Yeah, just to begin with, I'm a product of young people. For me to be a member of parliament, I was supported by a lot of young people in my constituency. And that's the reason why I still feel I should remain connected to the young people. And I believe that in the parliament, in the space of parliament, apart from an advocate of young people's rights, I'm also the vice chairperson for the Zambian Parliamentary Caucus on Children, which is a product of the support from Plan Zambia and some of the partners who are maybe part of this core who could have contributed in supporting the Zambian parliament to establish a caucus that is purely focused on seeing that the adolescent health and issues around children's rights are protected in the Zambian parliament, because in a clear way, as members of parliament, we've got a responsibility to ensure that the young people's rights are protected, and adolescent health in the Zambian parliament is one of the priorities. Not only in the Zambian parliament, but also our president Hakainde Hichilema, President HH, is an ambassador of ending child marriage in Africa. And it has become very clear that as parliamentarians, we need to rally behind the stakeholders, to rally behind the CSOs that are working around promoting adolescent health. And it is against that background why, as parliamentarians, the Zambian parliament, so I'm speaking on behalf of the other members, about 52 members of parliament who are not here, who sent their gratitude to the support that Plan with you are providing in building the capacity of members of parliament, and also in working together to see that adolescent health becomes a priority in our parliament. So basically, we have done quite a lot working closely with Plan Zambia and some of their stakeholders. And as parliamentarians, we've been very instrumental in championing adolescent health. I didn't mention, or perhaps I didn't mention, that the National Assembly of Zambia's strategic plan, it calls upon Parliament being more outgoing, depending on the civil society like Plan Zambia, to give us researched information, researched data on most of the thematic areas, including legislative framework on supporting adolescent health. So we've been working very close with Plan Zambia, together with the Ministry of Health, in wanting to see that we influence the legal framework in the Zambian parliament around adolescent health. So there's been a lot of discussion going on, working with our stakeholders, not forgetting the young people, and the young people have been very key in most of these discussions. Several meetings, several consultative meetings have been held with Plan and their partners. The 1.8 billion stakeholders meeting, we've had these meetings, and the young people have been at the center of these meetings. We've had meetings where young people have come from universities, young people from the disadvantaged communities, gathered together and being given an opportunity to engage with their members of parliament. And I think that is one of the most interesting aspects. I could hear in the initial discussions that in some of the countries, it's very difficult to engage members of parliament. But for Zambia, I think we've made it different. Our strategy is very clear that we need to interact with the young people. We need to interact with different CSOs so that we get the issues, we get their needs. And in our legislative framework, we are not supposed to be speaking in abstract, but we need to deal with issues that concerns the young people. And in the space of this discussion, I think we've had moments when, with the young people and our stakeholders, we've taken advantage to look at some of the strategic documents that contribute towards attainment of adolescent health, especially focus on the SDG 20. The SDGs focuses. We've looked at the National Strategic Health Plan, and this document, members of parliament, stakeholders, and the young people, they've been part of this process. We've also been reviewing the National Community Strategy for 2022 to 2026, and also the National Standards and Guidelines for Adolescent-Friendly Health Service. I think Tokoza did mention how the number of safe spaces are increasing. All this is as a result of some of the review processes that we have taken keen interest as parliamentarians working with our stakeholders. One of the strategies that we believe that as parliamentarians we are backbenchers. The process to make our government accountable, it should also be driven internally within parliament. And through this caucus that we are working with the plan and others, we are using it to provide an accountability mechanism within our own government. We've taken advantage of some moments when our stakeholders have given us questions to ask on the floor of the House. We've taken advantage of secret meetings between us from Parliament and our stakeholders when we are championing the Child Code Bill. We used to have meetings at night between us, the CSOs, and some few members of Parliament who are champions. So we've taken advantage of the caucus and the relationship that stakeholders like Plan they've built internally within Parliament to champion some of these issues that we feel that without that deliberate relationship, it will be very difficult to break some of the gaps and also to ensure that the documents that government is drafting around adolescent health, they are documents that speak to the needs of the young people. As I speak right now, well, Zambia is on history to have enacted the Child Code Bill that was sitting on the shelves for over 20 years plus. And right now, we are also working with our partners in looking at the Marriage Act of 2023, which is very soon. We're again working to push that it comes on the floor of the House so that we define the age of marriage. We become, we standardize with other countries that have made it very clear, like Malawi and others. So we are doing all these internal processes with our stakeholders to ensure that we prioritize, we put the health of the adolescents at the center of our parliamentary agenda. But some of the things I would mention is that one of the greatest cause is the fact that in all our work, we have put the young people as stakeholders. They are working very close without overshadowing them, but they've been at the center of the processes. We have been having engagement, and at some point, as young members of Parliament, we've attended some of the peer meetings that the young people are having in the communities. They would draw one member of Parliament just to join them and inspire them and just demonstrate that we are with them, and we feel that the influence that we hold, it can contribute towards improving their lives and ensuring that they lead their life which is health and protects their well-being. Members, I conclude some of the key issues that we are doing now is ensuring in our commitments are issues around having a very clear budgeting process, and the budgeting process should include the young people. The young people should be part of the budgeting process. Right now, budgeting consultations will be starting, and we look forward that our stakeholders mobilize the young people, even from the rural-most areas. They need to be part of this process so that they participate in the budget making process, especially around health, around education. Right now, Zambia has just enacted a free education policy. So for us, I think we feel every child has that opportunity now. And also around social protection, we feel that the young people should participate in social protection budget agendas. And lastly, on the environment, you know the effects of climate change on the young people. And we feel these budget processes should have the young people. The second one is around the domestication of some of the national documents, like the National Adolescent Health Plan, that would eventually align with the relevant documents that Parliament is trying to enact, like adolescent, the Child Code Bill, which has already come into effect. It is now being popularized, and also this comes into fruition at the young people period. Then also we are working around supporting the support to safe school, GB-related issues in the schools, and the government is in the process of developing the child safeguarding guidelines, and we are also ensuring that this commitment gets to be acted upon, and it comes and it gets fulfilled, because we feel that safe school, right now we've got over 2 million children that have gotten back to school as a result of the new policy. So we feel these children, the schools, they need to be safe, and as parliamentarians we remain committed. Then lastly, it's just the general desire that we involve the young people at every level. So our parliament has become so open, the stakeholders can engage through the caucus, through individual members of parliament, and we feel with the presidential commitment on putting children at the center of the agenda, on fighting any child marriage, and on ensuring that our budgets are aligned to the needs of the young people, we shall be able to get the goals that we want to achieve, and we will meet our SDGs, and our children will become active participants. Everyone was talking about children just being participants for the sake of participating. We want them to give their views, their ideas, and contribute meaningfully to national development. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Honorable. And you really touched on such excellent points about the multi-sectoral nature of prioritizing adolescents across the different agenda, which takes me to our next panelist, Mr. Simwaka from the government of Malawi. Your government's commitment to adolescent well-being does encompass all of the domains of the adolescent well-being framework, and it is a very comprehensive commitment itself. And as Honorable just mentioned about climate change becoming a very growing issue that young people are definitely putting it as at the top of the agenda that policymakers need to look at. The government of Malawi did indeed commit about making sure that 70% of the climate financing loans that are provided to be grants for countries like Malawi to benefit for 40% of the adolescents as a population group. So over to you, Mr. Simwaka. I'd like to hear a little bit more about how the government has truly benefited from positioning this as a multi-sectoral agenda and to make sure that this is taken up as a responsibility for implementation across all of the ministries in government. Over to you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I can see that I'm muted on the video. I don't know whether it's from that side.
We can hear you. Yeah, where your video is not visible, but that's fine. We can continue, and grateful if you could give us a quick answer so that we can come back for another round of questions as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The government of Malawi is committed to promoting adolescents' well-being. Climate change, as of now, is one of the major issues affecting us as a country and global-wise. Malawi, in the recent 5 years or so, we have been facing a lot of challenges related to climate change. So many cyclones, and we have lost so many lives, so many people displaced, and ensuring that we bring an impact on bringing a differentiated impacts on climate change. We have made sure that the adolescents are at the center of mitigating and trying to prevent issues of climate change. So deliberately, we have formulated what we call a youth in climate change network, which is in the driving force, because we have a lot of youth who can make a difference in terms of mitigating climate change. We have seen that, yes, if we leave the youth behind, these are the people who are most innovative to bring a change. They have the technology. So even when drafting our national strategies, we make sure that the youth are at the center of this. And when we were drafting our gap analysis, we had to assemble a team of youth focusing on those who are the experts in climate change, so that whatever we are trying to input into this, it should be coming from them. Already it has been spoken over and over that it's not about not only engaging the youth, but meaningfully letting them contribute towards issues that affect them most. So as a government of Malawi, deliberately, we made sure that the youth are at the center. And when we were doing our gap analysis, 95% of the participants were the youth. And maybe from the government side, we were very few, just trying to bring in the policy guidance from the Ministry of Youth itself, Natural Resources, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Labor. But even including in these ministries, we are making sure that we have a linkage with the youth so that they contribute and bring in contributions that talk to the 5 domains, including the area of climate change, which is of great impact to us in Malawi at the meantime.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Maka. I think you definitely touched about the importance of making sure that this is a multi-sectoral agenda, and for us to make sure that if we do not take this on across different sectors with dedicated policies, then we will not be able to truly deliver results. Thank you for highlighting that. When we speak about multi-sectoral, we also need to make sure that we have the multiple perspectives of different stakeholders and the mandates that their own organizations bring in a collaborative manner for us to be able to truly get there. With this, I'd like to invite Edmund Banafonarte, who is the Technical Officer for Adolescent Health and Development with WHO Ghana. Edmund, tell us a little bit more about the role of UN agencies such as normative organizations, and in particular WHO, how you played a key role in Ghana by working alongside different partners, but also facilitating and strengthening the government in its leadership for the commitment to adolescent well-being itself.
Okay, thank you very much, and good afternoon from Ghana. Actually, WHO's mandate specifically on this support was to try as much as possible to coordinate activities and ensure that we have a commitment for the country. So what WHO specifically did initially was to be able to map all initial stakeholders. That is the youth-led organization that was on the ground, and also to also mobilize and connect with Plan International Ghana. WHO specifically worked with the Ministry of Health and its agencies to ensure that government businesses are implemented with regards to health. So basically, we were able to map up our initial stakeholders, the youth-led organization and Plan International. There were some consultative meetings that we had with Plan International and then the youth-led organization and Ministry of Health to try and see how we can all work together. And the outcome was to get all relevant stakeholders in the area of adolescent health to be able to work together to be able to sign the commitment on adolescent health and well-being on behalf of Ghana. And I must say that the Ministry of Health within their country did a marvelous job. I think when we got into contact with them, what they actually were open arms. They actually led the entire process for drafting government commitments through trying to bring on board different interagency working group and task force. We actually had over 21 different organizations and agencies coming on board, like the UN, most of these UN organizations, UNFPA, UNICEF, the West African Health Organization. We had youth groups, we had academia, we had adolescents with disabilities, the gender ministry. We have quite a number of organizations that we were able to bring to the table to be able to draft the commitment on behalf of Ghana. And I think one of the key rallying points was that I think most of the stakeholders that were brought also really made time, even though the time for us to get the commitment ready was a very short time, but most of these stakeholders that we were able to bring on board were able to really dedicate their time to ensure that Ghana had a commitment for the country. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much, Edmund. With that, as you rightly said, we were working on with limited resources, and despite that, the determination and the commitment from the partners was incredible. So I'd like to now invite Jonathan from Plan International Nigeria to tell us what were some of the challenges that you actually encountered in mobilizing support for the commitments at the national level, and how did you overcome them? This can be definitely helpful for the audience who are also keen to understand, saying, if I want to be able to do this and work with partners and get them interested, how do I go about it? So over to you, Jonathan.
Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. So one of the challenges that definitely would encounter in terms of an intergenerational conversation or project of this kind is navigating through the process of bringing in an older generation and younger generation, two generations with different perspectives, two generations with different responsibilities. So prior to now, in terms of policy formulation, when it has to do with adolescent well-being, youth engagement, and inclusion of young people in development process, we've always had situations where you have the policymakers sit and then decisions have been made and then decisions have been taken. So yes, the conversation was how can we begin to do things differently? And there was this pushback, regular pushback from the policymakers in terms of the young people may not necessarily be able to articulate. And sometimes there's that tendency of people we bring into the table. So you find situations where some of the policymakers tell you some of the conversation will be this, and this, and this. And so most times when the young people are engaged, we still find that the predictions sometimes tally with what the young people are bringing on the table. But then it took over a time of lobbying, took over a time of socialization and enlightenment to get the policymakers to begin from the young people's perspective, to begin to see that there is a need for them to bring the young people to the table. But as I said this, it's not just for the INGOs, the CSOs to drive this process. It's the ability for the CSOs to build the capacity of these young people to be able to engage meaningfully. So one of the things we did was, of course, the project heavily was on the rights-based approach. So we continually built the capacity of the young people. We continually give them the support. We continually give them the space and the platform to engage. So whatever platform, including radio calls, when policymakers are on radio, we try to put them on alerts to reach out and then speak and then put their demands there. When there were big platforms where policymakers were going to speak, we tried to bring them on board to ensure that they spoke. And of course, there's this theory of if you're not invited to the table, create your table. So the young people created their own table. In a sense, they created their platform and then they invited policymakers to those platforms. And the policymakers came. And this was the time where they owned the show. This was the time where they owned the platform and they controlled the conversation. So they were able to control the conversation. They were able to tease out their questions and they were able to get the policymakers to make commitments. So yes, one of the challenges you would always encounter is bring two generations with different responsibilities and perspectives to dialogue and to an agreement. The second challenge that definitely we will continue to face, or you would face, and which we need to think and agree on how to navigate through, is the policy, the challenge of existing policies. So sometimes because the policies and the laws are already existing that create these gaps, it's quite difficult for you to step into this process. So I give an instance. There's a child right law here, which prohibits child marriage. When you go through the Charter of the Convention to listen or adolescent only child in Nigeria. And you see that right acts that prohibits child marriage. But in the Nigerian Constitution, there are clause, section 20 laws, and once 18, person is deemed an adult. A of subs of 29 married an adult, which means that it's conversations that has been driven over 10 years. Yes, you want to end early marriage, but it is the people's culture. It is the culture of a people from a certain area, and more so, the Constitution recognizes this. This, to a large extent, became a policy conversation. Another, again, is, for instance, the Charter still recognizes free education. The young people wanted free education, or they want free education. And there's also in the Constitution that says education shall be free when practicable. And that again became a challenge. But how were they able, or how are they navigating through this process? The democracy convening, the young people had parliamentarians who spoke to them. And one of the commitments they had parliamentarians make was, we want a particular section of the Constitution amended, which is section 18. And it should read that education should be free for every Nigerian. Apparently, that is the house. And the young people are organizing on social media, organizing town hall meetings, they are in terms of rural engagement to ensure that the bill does not just get the parliamentary support, but gets the people's will from the outside. This is a way to push the process from external into the internal chamber of the parliament. And then the last challenge we are likely to face is challenge of resources. So as much as this is the people's will, resources needs to be available to drive this process. So when the young people are organized, they need banners, they need IEC materials, they need visibility materials. And sometimes the media has sometimes been compromised to the point where even if young people invite them to cover their campaigns and their events, they need stipends to support the transportation of these media houses. And that you have loosely organized, serve a particular structure, we find it difficult to ask funds to drive this process. So it becomes quite a challenge for them to organize in a meaningful way to drive their messages. And so resources would always be a problem. So my thoughts around this would be that international organizations should begin to look at their youth engagement framework to ensure that it is not just for structured youth platforms, but for loose youth movements like the ones we're engaging with currently, that do not have like a face, that do not have like a defined structure, but have like an organizing and organic method of driving campaigns and advocacy. And the last challenge we would always face, colleagues, is the challenge of acceptability. So innovation is usually difficult to accept, and the young people are innovative people. To say that the older generation isn't innovative, but the young people see things from different, they are driven from different perspectives. And it is always a challenge that when they bring these new demands to the table, the existing policies and laws, which already have a modus operandi or a process of engagement. And there is always that pushback in terms of acceptance of these processes. How can we continue to do this? How can we continue to navigate through this? It has to do through continuous dialogue, consultation, and enlightenment. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan. This has been fantastic. And of course, all of this conversation can keep on going and continuing, and we would always love to hear and learn more. Unfortunately, we are coming to the top of our hour for the end of this webinar. We already have some excellent exchange in the chat. So I do invite all of the participants and audience to post your questions in the chat. Unfortunately, we're not able to do a detailed Q&A with the panelists, but please do post your questions, and I invite the panelists to respond to them in the chat directly as well. Furthermore, I would also like to invite the panelists to pop in the chat your one key takeaway in terms of the process that you encountered and your learning, and what would be your message to others who want to follow this agenda, or if they want to replicate this effort in their countries, what would be your learning? As you all heard from the start of this webinar already, that this is a very much of a joint effort by PM&CH partners, including Plan International and other partners with the support of Fondation Botnar as well. So I'd like to now invite Ula Jasper from Fondation Botnar to share a few words before we close out the webinar. Before Ula comes in, I also want to share that if any of you are interested in supporting the commitment mobilization efforts in your own countries, please then do not hesitate to reach out to us at PM&CH, and we'd be happy to support you with all of the information and resources to take this forward as well. Ula, we have 1 minute for your closing, but I know it will be very powerful. Thank you, Ula.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tahira, and thank you everyone for this really wonderful and insightful webinar. I just have to say that I totally enjoyed the powerful and really forceful interventions that were made, especially by the young leaders today. I think what we have seen in the past 4 to 5 years is that adolescent and young people's health and well-being has slowly but steadily, maybe, been put onto the agenda of policymakers in national governments, in UN agencies, in multilateral donors, and so forth. And I also think that the participation of several esteemed members of parliaments and representatives of governments in this meeting today is great evidence of this. And it was extremely valuable, I think, to hear from you about how you navigate challenges in local policy contexts. But as Anshu has pointed out in the beginning, our efforts must not stop here, shouldn't stop here. And there is still a lot that we need to do. I think we must ensure still that more governments understand the unique needs and also the great potential that 1.8 billion young people can contribute. And for this, we all, and not just governments, need to listen better and more to the voices of young people, actually in a meaningful, non-tokenistic way. Several of you have said this today. We also must ensure that more governments have specific national policies in place. And finally, and again, I'm quoting Anshu here, we need to ensure that governments put their money where their mouth is and that they commit resources to young people's health and well-being. So let us not become complacent, I would say, and this is my big kind of takeaway, I think. Let's not become complacent with what we have achieved so far. Let's continue to jointly advocate for young people's health and well-being. This includes monitoring the progress, but also calling for transparency. This was also, I think, an important outcome, that sometimes it's not clear what's going on. So let's call for transparency. But I think it also includes holding governments and multilaterals, as well as philanthropies and other donors, accountable for what they must do and need to do. So yeah, it was a great pleasure to partner with all of you, especially with Plan International Canada and PMNCH, and to partner with the young leaders who contributed so insightfully in this endeavor. And we at Fondation Botna are really looking forward to continuing our joint efforts together with all of you. So yeah, without much further ado, I just wanted to thank you once again, all of you, especially Tahira and Janani for organizing this call and for putting it all together. Thank you so much, and yeah, very well done. It's a pleasure listening to all of you.
Thank you very much, Ula. I think with that, we are closing today's session, but we would like to thank everyone for your participation and for joining us today. We will be sharing the recording of the session, which will also be accompanied by a webpage that details all the work that's being done in all of the countries that were supported by this initiative. And we really hope we will be sharing that in about the next couple weeks. If there are any questions, thank you for posing them in the chat. We will respond to you, or if you have any, if we can stay on for a couple more minutes if there are any burning questions. Everybody's available, but maybe there's just one question.
Janani, it's Chris here. Can I just make a suggestion?
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah. Just for some reason, our chat is not allowing all of us to hit messages to everyone. And I saw that there was a message from Tahira for people to reach out to her, because I know there was some interest in engaging with PMNCH and presumably some interest in engaging with Plan on this work. So I wonder if perhaps Tahira, you could give your email address verbally so people can get that, and then maybe in the follow-up we also provide email addresses for you and Tahira so people can reach out to you directly. I think everybody's got yours from the invite, so that should be fine. But Tahira, if you can make sure everybody has your email address so that they can connect with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris. So I've already popped it in the chat, and
yeah, so sorry to hear, people can't see it in the chat because it just goes to, it only goes to panelists for some reason. There's a bit of a glitch. That's why I came in.
Okay, I'll put it for everyone as well. So we will send out the communication as a recording of the webinar itself to all of the participants who joined us today, along with the resources that Janani mentioned. And in that as well, we'll include details on how to reach out to PMNCH as well as plan colleagues if you want to be able to replicate some of this work in your own countries, and if you want to be able to mobilize commitments and how we can work together. I'm also sharing. So if you're still on the call, you can reach out to me, Tahira Mustafa, mustafat@who.int, mustafat@who.int. But if there's nothing more, then thank you once again for all of your interest and exciting exchange. This was fantastic. So wish you all a wonderful rest of the day, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.